Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Parishscope. This is the podcast that is kind of an extension of our newsletter at St. John San Prairie. I'm Pastor Chris Sansom.
And I'm Casey Drumas. I'm the Creative Worship Director at Our Savior Lutheran in Washington.
Well, all right. Well, let's get started. It's been a long while.
It has been.
It's been a busy summer.
It has been
a very busy summer. I know a lot of people have asked me, like, are you guys still doing the podcast? I'm like, yeah, we're still doing it. But oh man, there's just been so much going on, and we do this on Tuesday nights, and a lot of it has just been stuff that hits on Tuesday nights.
Yeah,
just stuff coming up out of the blue or what have you, and either you have a conflict or I have a conflict, and so it's like So it's been a while. Hopefully we'll as the school year starts, maybe we'll get more consistent. Hopefully that's the case. I know at one time we had this real hope of having like all these like extras to throw at you. And
yeah, we got ahead of ourselves for a while there.
Yeah,
and then we ended up using all of them, and then now we're
like so behind.
Yeah.
Oh man, are we behind? But.
Yeah.
But it's okay. It's okay. We'll get back in the groove maybe, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
So anyway, we were just talking just before we started, and it's like I'm so sick of politics, like trying to find a news story and all that kind of stuff. So I figured one of the things I think is always kind of inspiring to see and inspiring to talk about is actually the Olympics.
Yeah.
And we've got a pretty good fill of the Olympics over the last couple of weeks, and that's been. That's been a lot of fun. I really enjoy watching it. I'm not saying I'm like a diehard fan. I don't watch every little thing, and I don't like keep up with all of it. But I do, when it's on the TV and it's on at night or whenever it is, I do like watching it.
Yeah,
I had a good time. It's nice to see kind of big time athletes in a sense, at their peak. Really.
Oh yeah, it's incredible. I mean, I haven't followed it as much this year, and I usually am actually, when the Olympics are on, I get very kind of nerdy about, like, I really want to watch as much. Not, like, again, I'm not diehard, I'm not watching at 3 a.m. or something like a live stream, but I do when it's on at night. I like to try to watch it if I can. I haven't been as good this year, but it is, I mean, just crazy things has happened. Like, the whole Simone Biles did, like, a move, like, a spin that no one has ever landed before.
Yeah,
this year. It's like, that's just incredible. It's amazing.
Yeah, no, that was incredible. And then there's a few records that kind of fell. And it was one of the fun things I really enjoyed was, there was a couple times where they like kind of panned over to see Michael Phelps, sitting in the stands, watching his records like fall.
Yeah.
And it's like he was happy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think there's something to that. Like I think a lot of us, maybe would have been like a little upset. Like here we had this record, hopefully it would stand, and it didn't stand. And, but he seemed almost excited about it from what I saw. And I mean, there is something to be, something to be said about, applauding other people, even other people that are, accomplishing awesome things.
Yes, it is. I think it just shows, I mean, sportsmanship. That I was talking to my brother about this just yesterday, just kind of about the different cultures of like different sports, and even like music can be like this at times. That there's certain environments and cultures that are very unwelcoming, and they're very competitive to a point of they actually like don't want you to succeed, because that for some reason in their mind makes them feel like they're less of a success, even though you can both be good or whatever it may be. But yeah, I mean, it's cool to see Michael Phelps just cheering the person on and not just being like, oh man, they beat my record. Yeah. I'm sure there's a part of him that it would feel good if for 40 years no one broke his record, because that would feel pretty cool. But
But yeah, no, and I do love that, and I also love this. And I mean, one of the things that you get to see with the Olympics is you get to see like all these people, and I know we talk about the status of the United States in terms of dare I say racism and all that kind of stuff. But one of the kind of the really cool things about the Olympics as you see this clear as day more than anywhere else, and this is actually a joke from a famous comedian, but it's so true. And it's like, you look at all the countries when they're all like walking up, and it's like, you know, when they call China's name, like all those people would stereotypically look Chinese.
Yeah.
You know, or when they have some other country, they look stereotypically like they're from that country.
Right.
You know, to the degree like you understand where the stereotypes come from. And then they call out America's name and the United States. And it's like, man, we just got everything.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we
we're the melting pot for a reason.
Well, exactly. You know, but I mean, I think sometimes I hate to say that we forget that, but you know, you hear all this talk about racism, this and yada, yada, that and yada, yada. And this minority and that minority. It's kind of fun to see it on the Olympic stage, to see all those ethnicities all kind of like intermingled in essence in there. You know, here you have this big sporting event, and it's like, yeah, we got a little bit of everything here. You know,
yeah,
and it's kind of cool. I think it's kind of fun.
Yeah, well, and I think it's the purest form of like, you don't care what the person looks like. You're looking at what can they do. Yeah, and I think that's what's so. I mean, I think that's one reason why sports are great, because you know there's Shane Gillis, the comedian, has this whole joke about like the movie Remember the Titans, where it's like this really, you know, it's like, I mean, based on a true story, but very all white town, very racist, would not allow any black people on their team. And then, you know, within 8 weeks, all of a sudden they go from being like, they're not allowed on our team to like, those are my brothers. We're 8-0, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's, but I think that's the same. I think, like when I look at, I'm a jazz person and looking through history, there's a lot of barriers that got broken in music because someone like Frank Sinatra would say, like, I don't care what the color that the skin of this person is. They're an amazing piano player. They're playing for me.
Yeah.
So you're going to let them in this club or else I'm leaving. And so like they broke a lot of barriers because it's not about, like, it really isn't about the race. It's about what can they do. And so people tend to, like, even if they have a little bit of that, I don't know, like, I don't want to say racism, but like if they feel like awkward around people who don't look like them, it's like you watch someone do something amazing and it's like you can't deny that. It's like, wow, that person just did something, you know, unbelievable.
Well, you know, and I think that's to me, to some degree, that's one of the things that I just never understood. You know, like even from a scriptural standpoint, like, you know, Paul talks about a church, you know, being like this body of Christ and all these different members, and they all have these different places and roles and all these kind of things. So it's not that hard of a concept. Like some people are really gifted in one area and some people are really gifted in another area. And you go, okay, well, you should do this over here because that's where you're gifted at. You know, those are your skills. That's something that God has given you, a talent he's given you. You know, the Lord be praised for that. You know, but for some reason we seem to like ignore that when it comes to other things. Like, you know, again, there's a reason that these stereotypes exist. You know, look, let's look at it on the positive side. Like, you know, people of Chinese descent tend to be good at math. You know, that doesn't mean that if you are of Chinese descent that you're automatically good at math.
Right.
But it does mean that you know, again, stereotypically, whatever they're doing, whether it's a genetic thing or a way that their parents are teaching them or however it is, they seem to excel at math. And so it's like, so why not applaud that? That's a great thing.
Yeah.
And that's a great thing for our country. You know, if they're over here and they're Chinese and they're really good at math, then that's awesome. You know, I'm not good at math. I mean, I like math. I'm okay at math, but like, I'm not a professor of calculus by any stretch. And that's not to say that somebody who isn't Chinese can't excel at math. Of course they can. But again, it's just one of those things. Those stereotypes are there for a reason. And I think all people, all ethnicities have certain gifts. Some of them, you know, again, are a cultural gift that's been giving them from passing down the culture. Some of it is from, you know, adaptation, you know, from where they, you know, where from the ethnicity where they came from, you know. But I think we should applaud those gifts, not look down on them. But I think that's one of the cool things about, again, seeing the Olympics is you get to see it all just come into play, and you get to see that kind of really fleshed out, right? Because you're seeing all these different ethnicities that are doing what they're really gifted at, what they're really good at, and I think that's so awesome.
Yeah, I mean, to see, seeing people from all cultures, and there's something cool to me about, like, especially like since I'm a music person, when I meet other music people who are at, like, and I don't mean this in a pretentious way, but at the same level as me, like, just as far as like they've studied in college, or they've put in as much time as I have. I can understand them in a way that I like, an unspoken way. I can understand what they've gone through, because I know how hard it is to get to this point, or and so for those people, I think it's cool to see all these, like, you see gymnasts, and it's like they've all gone through very intense training, so they all can have a bit of respect for each other, no matter what language they speak, what they look like, no matter, because they know, like, how hard it is to get there. So I don't know, it's a really cool thing, just every few years to see kind of the whole world just get together and do that. It's really quite fascinating, honestly.
No, I again, just kind of taking a little break from the political realm, but just to be able to watch that and kind of, and I mean, there was some controversies, throughout. What is it, Jordan Childs? Is that her name?
Oh, I haven't heard anything about this, to be honest with you.
So the controversy, from the way I understand it, and I'll be the first one to admit, I read like 2 different articles, and the two articles seem to say almost 2 different things.
Oh,
and so. From the way I understand it, she talked to her coach a little too long, and so she was actually stripped of her medal. She won like silver, and she was stripped of her medal. And a lot of people, think that that's what is that, like an undue punishment? Like the punishment does not quite fit the crime.
Yeah.
But at the same time, and I mean, this kind of stinks, but at the same time, it's like, well, but rules are rules.
Yeah, what you're signing up for.
Whether we like it or not, you can't just go breaking rules. So again, I mean, but now somebody more educated than me would, maybe chime in on something like that. But I that's kind of the way I heard it.
Yeah,
that she talked to her coach just a little long, and we're talking seconds.
Yeah,
but yet, again, rules are rules. You got to do what you got to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other controversy was with the boxer. So there was so it was female boxing, and basically, one boxer was from Italy, and I forget where the other one was from. But it's kind of a confusing scenario, because a lot of people want to tie this in with the trans movement.
Gotcha.
But it's not that.
Okay.
This gal, she was born with, basically she was born with both.
Right. Yeah.
And so she has an XY chromosome. She had higher testosterone levels. But it was like, she was a she, he.
They had chosen, I mean, had they chosen a site? Because I mean, some people, when they're born, they choose, like, in that situation.
I don't necessarily know if this was one of those scenarios where she could choose, per se.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
However, the argument seems to be that because of the level of testosterone that she had, because, again, she had male hormones.
Yeah.
Gave her an unfair advantage in terms of her bone structure and muscle and all that kind of stuff.
Gotcha.
And the fight lasted like 46 seconds.
Yeah.
Like, she hit the girl from Italy so hard that the girl just gave up.
Out. Oh.
The girl just gave up. She said, "I've never been hit so hard in all my life."
Yeah.
So she said, "This isn't fair." And and again, this is one of those things where, like, and depending on where you're going to find yourself on the issue, the reality is that it was unfortunate that this girl was born, in essence, the way she was. But she still has a lot of potential and a lot of things. But I just don't know if boxing is in it for her, because she's not big enough and strong enough to go into the male boxing, but she's too powerful for the female boxing due to the testosterone and all that.
Yeah.
So I mean, again, it's just a hard scenario, and I'm not saying that you know, I have all the answers. But again, I just kind of, I guess, pushing it out there to basically say, you know, when it comes to like trans athletes and stuff, I think there's a very clear distinction. A girl is a girl and a boy is a boy.
Yeah.
This one is a little bit more complicated than that.
Well, and I'm sure the people who are trying to turn this into a trans movement thing, I wonder how, I don't know how this, how she feels about that, because there's kind of, I mean, I would think if I was born that way, I would have a little different opinion on people who decide they want to be a different gender versus like if it was me being someone who that was something I couldn't control.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's, I don't know. I mean, maybe they're fine with that. Maybe they're okay with
Well,
that.
and again, I mean, I'm bringing it up to say that this was one of the controversies that was discussed. And unfortunately, I'm not really giving a lot of answers. Like, I'm just saying, yeah, this is part of the discussion. But, you know, because this one is a little bit more complicated than just simply, you know, oh, this, you know, this man in essence wants to fight with women. It's like, that's not what this is.
Yeah, it's not what it is, yeah.
And again, there's no doubt she had an unfair advantage.
Right.
But at the same time, it's like, again, this gets a little convoluted, little complicated.
Right.
But definitely something worth discussing. I definitely think she had an unfair advantage, and I do not believe she should have been allowed to play, you know, to box in the Olympics.
Yeah.
But that being said, again, that's not hate on anybody, not hate on her.
Yeah.
I mean, again, even from the country standpoint, like, put yourself in that country, because she was not like a United States person. So it's like, but put yourself in that country. Like, here you have this boxer, like, that seems to just
who's crushing it.
Yeah, just absolutely crushing it. And then the final thing that I want to bring up, controversy wise, of the Olympics, is the breakdancing.
Oh yeah,
have you seen that?
I've seen the breakdancing. Yeah,
Australia sends out a PhD in cultural studies to do the breakdancing for Australia. And she scores exactly 0 points.
I didn't realize she got 0.
She got 0 points. But you know what? More power to her. She owned it, man. She went out there and just did it.
There's a statement I think she put out that was like, I've succeeded in my goal. I've now become the most famous break dancer in the world, or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, actually you are.
She has, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of memes I've seen already just made from that is unbelievable. It's crazy.
I know a lot of people have been like putting the memes and stuff out, like talking about the difference between experience versus education. You know, like it's one thing to read a book. Like it's one thing to read a book on how to fix a car. It's another to have the experience of like actually working on cars. You know, and yeah, here's a clear example, right? She has a PhD in this stuff, but she still doesn't have the experience.
She has a PhD in dancing?
I think it's what? I think it's like a form of cultural studying, but I do think breakdancing is actually part of that.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah,
I could be wrong. It's not like I did a lot of research here for this.
It's a different world though. My band played at the Make Music Normal Festival, and before us was a breakdancing crew from Chicago.
Oh.
And I tell you, it's just one of those things where I can watch it and kind of enjoy it. But I sit there and go like, man, it's just not, I can't, I watch it, but I'm not in that world, man. I can't do that world at all. It's just a very different thing. And when it comes to like drumming or playing music or singing, I can put my all into it. But I can't do that with dancing. It's just not something I can do. But the other thing we have to, I don't know if you've, I'm sure you've seen this, is the Turkish pistol shooter.
Yeah. That guy's crazy.
And I saw today that apparently they said like he's the guy who didn't use any sort of, like, they all wear this special gear, like like glasses with all these specific little like things and stuff, so that they can, and they look kind of silly now when you see this guy just go up and shoot, but he just wore his normal prescription glasses, went up there and shot, and got silver, and people are gonna, but the funny thing is they said how like, oh, everybody loves these memes of him because it's like he just doesn't care, like, he's just gonna go out there and do it, get the job done. And he apparently said that I saw an interview with him where he goes that he goes, oh, that's not even really half the story. He goes, I literally was sitting at home and a notification came on his phone that said, you got to go to the Olympics. So he got he literally stood up from dinner and was like, oh, I got to go. And he went to a cab, went to the Olympics. And he said, like, right after he got done and won, he just went back home. Like right after this, he got the silver. He just went back. He said, Jeez, sorry.
What did you do?
I don't know. It just started getting our sound all of a sudden started getting really loud in my ears. I don't know if that was for you. And all of a sudden it just went crazy. But he said that his dinner was still warm when he got home or something like that. So, I don't know. I saw he was on like a podcast, and that's what he said.
Yeah. I love the meme that said Turkey just sent out a legit hitman.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh man, but yeah, the guy. I mean, he's wearing blue jeans and stuff.
Yeah, he just doesn't. He just looks like some guy that came off the street. Like they don't.
He's got like a turkey shirt. Like he's just like, yeah, I'm gonna go do the Olympics.
Yeah. That's so funny.
Man. But yeah, so those are definitely some of the highlights from the Olympics. It was good.
Yeah.
It was fun. It was good.
Yeah.
Oh man. All right. Should we move on?
Yeah, sure.
Oh yeah. We gotta move on.
I was thinking about this. Now I asked someone the other day, I don't know if we've talked about this on the podcast ever, but I grew up in a very like the word alcohol or beer was like almost a curse word in my church growing up. It was like you don't say it in church.
Oh yeah.
So even though everybody knew, and you might be like, well, Josh's dad, he likes to have a beer every night when they have pizza. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like a little like, oh, yeah, don't talk about it. But then, I was talking because at Our Savior as well, it's like people, they'll talk about, having a beer or something. It's like not a faux pas thing. So it's like I grew up with this. It's very don't talk about it. But then and now one person did say, well, you realize most of us are of German descent, so of course we talk about it. We don't care. And I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But I thought I'd address that as far as when it comes to substance abuse, or I shouldn't say that, but alcohol in general, or even going into maybe I don't know. Is there anything in the Bible talking about drug use? Or any sort of like anything we can adapt to that.
Okay, so this is actually a really good topic.
Good.
Yeah. I don't know we've had beer on the set.
We have, yeah, I know.
But I don't know how much we've actually talked about this.
Yeah.
Maybe we talked about it in the early episodes or something.
The common people always like to say like, well, Jesus drank wine. And yeah, which is true. I mean,
well, and though I'd like to point out a couple different things actually. The first one is not just that Jesus drank wine. Yes, Jesus drank wine. And yes, it was alcoholic. Anybody that tries to argue it wasn't alcoholic or it was just grape juice is out of their mind. It was alcoholic. That was how they did it back then. That was how they made the water and everything safe.
Yeah.
Like a lot of it was alcoholic.
And they didn't have Coca-Cola delivery drivers though at the time.
No, none of that. But one of the things that needs to kind of be corrected is a couple different things. First of all, the idea of drunkenness. Mm-hmm. It is different in modern day than it is in the ancient world. Mm. And it's important to recognize that difference. Like when you think of intoxication, for most people, about the first thing that they really think about is driving.
Yeah.
That is to say, if you're intoxicated, don't drive.
Right.
Like you're impaired. Like you can't drive. You can't operate a heavy machinery. You can't operate a car. That kind of thing. Well, in the ancient world, they walked everywhere, so they didn't really care about that.
That's true. Yeah.
So it was this idea of being sober-minded, which is something that Paul actually calls Christians to do, to be sober-minded. But it was the idea that you have the full use of your facilities. Mm. Right? There's a difference between, okay, I probably shouldn't be driving a car, but I can walk just fine, versus I'm stumbling all over myself and I'm tripping everywhere and I'm slurring my words.
Yeah.
Right? In the ancient world, that way is drunk. You are losing the ability of your facilities.
Okay.
So to experience the, dare I say, the pleasure of alcohol, dare I say, what most people would call a buzz. Throughout the Old Testament, they would call it, one of the beauties of the fruits of the vine.
Mm-hmm.
They'd call it about the benefit of the fruits of the vine.
Okay.
Paul calls on Timothy to cure stomach ills by drinking a little bit of wine.
Okay.
Again, so alcohol and wine is all over Scripture, but it all comes down to this idea of, what is your ability to use your facilities?
Mm-hmm.
Can you think? Can you still process information? Can you walk and talk and all those kind of things? Because if you can do all those things, then you are still sober-minded.
Okay.
Now, if you keep that in mind, then all of a sudden it's like all those other Bible stories make sense, and you can understand why the Bible condemns drunkenness. Because it does. It condemns drunkenness. But again, a lot of people think, okay, well, that means my definition of drunkenness. It's like, no. It's the ancient definition of drunkenness. And I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second, too. But go back to the wedding of Cana. Mm-hmm. John 2. Jesus is at a wedding, which, by the way, weddings lasted days.
Yeah.
3 days, 4 days, however long it took, whatever. And so they would drink wine. And the master of the feast, his job was to water down the wine. And so what he would do is basically he would give the guest wine, and then as they grew happy, he would water it down.
Right.
So that they didn't get too drunk. He didn't want them to get drunk. He wanted them to stay happy.
Okay.
And so he'd water it down, but if the mood started to go downhill, he would water it less so that the wine would be more potent.
Yeah.
That was his whole job. Like that was one of the aspects of his job, was to keep literally everybody at that happy point.
Interesting. Okay.
And so that's what he's doing. So when you understand that, realize like when Jesus makes like 30 gallons of wine, he's making it for a bunch of people that are buzzing.
Yeah.
And the master of the feast takes it and he says, man, this is great stuff. Where'd it come from? And, and that's the whole thing, like the whole miracle. And then Jesus talks about how, it's kind of a sign that's directing our attention towards the marriage feast that is to come. And think about that. Like, we're talking about a marriage feast where everybody's what? Drinking wine.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, to just do a strict condemnation of alcohol or even some of the side effects, the benefits of alcohol, I think is a bit much. And I think that's where, Lutherans have predominantly stood. We might say all things in moderation.
Right.
But really what we're saying is you shouldn't be sloshed.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be sloshed.
Yeah.
If you get sloshed, you've taken it too far.
Mm-hmm.
The Bible does condemn drunkenness. Paul oftentimes talks about making sure that we're sober-minded.
Mm-hmm.
And so alcohol abuse is a thing, and it shouldn't be done.
Yes.
But that being said, we also have to be careful because, like some of the condemnations of drunkenness, the verbal usage there, it is a present participle, and this is why that's important.
Mm-hmm.
Because in Greek they do this whole thing with verbal aspect, and so the present tense implies a continuation of the action. So to kind of break it down a little bit, maybe I'll hopefully try to make this a little bit more understandable.
Yeah.
Right. In English, we put everything into past, present, future.
Mm-hmm.
Like past, it is something that's gone. Present is happening right now. Future, it will happen in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Greeks tended to put more in terms of the verbal aspect. So let's say we're talking about a door.
Mm-hmm.
I opened the door. Well, that's past tense. I am opening the door. I'm doing that right now. Or I will open the door. That's future, right? That's the way we do it in that.
Right.
Now, in Greek, we might say something like, I will continue, or I continue to open the door. It's a continual action.
Yeah, like I will, like as in you'll you will always open the door for people?
Yeah, I'm just going to continue opening. Just always be opening.
Yeah.
Like, and so you kind of have that aspect of continuation. And then we can get into perfect and imperfect, but we're not going to. The reason this is important is because that drunkenness is actually in a present tense, which means it's implying that there's going to be a continuing action. That is to say, you should not continually be getting drunk.
Yeah.
Well, that's a little bit different than don't ever get drunk.
Yeah.
Like, you shouldn't be a town drunk. You shouldn't be constantly getting drunk. This should not be a part of your lifestyle. You shouldn't be doing this constantly.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of one of those things where you got to kind of tease it out a little bit. I'll never forget, this is also one of the things I think is important. And by the way, this is why I think a lot of discussion needs to happen in the United States, especially about drinking and how we look at alcohol. Because I do think that there's a reality where I think Americans look at alcohol wrong.
Yeah.
And isn't that scary? I think that's scary, but it's true.
Yeah.
I do think it's true. Like when I was over, when I took a trip to Europe a couple years back, we went to a beer garden, and I remember it was a great time. We all had beers, like liters and half liters. I mean, lots of beer. It was great. But there was also like 16-year-olds drinking beer with us. Maybe not at my table, but around. But what was really cool is that like nobody was roaring drunk.
Yeah.
Nobody was violent. Nobody was just absolutely plastered. Everybody just sitting around having a good time.
Yeah.
And it was like, and that's kind of what I saw all over Europe. Like it wasn't uncommon to see people drinking beer for breakfast.
Yeah.
Which is unheard of in the United States. But you think about the concept. Like they're just having a beer for breakfast because that's, part of their culture, but they're not going to get smashed.
Right. Yes.
But in America, we want to hold off until the evening because that's when you're supposed to get intoxicated.
Right. Drink it all at night.
Yeah.
And
So it's
wasted.
So drinking becomes all about just being intoxicated. Whereas in other cultures that I personally think do it right, the whole purpose of alcohol is like, okay, I like the flavor of beer. I'm going to have a beer.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get smashed. I'm just going to have a beer.
Yeah.
And there's a complete difference with that. And I think a healthier difference in terms of that outlook.
Yeah. I definitely agree with you on that. Yeah.
So, I mean, look, I brew my own beer. I have absolutely no problem having a beer or having a cocktail, having a drink or whatever else. But at the same time, it's like there's a level where, like you shouldn't go past a certain point,
Yeah. I wonder why that is so different here, because, I mean, I know we did there was the Prohibition era where alcohol was illegal. And so it's like became this very sort of underground, kind of dirty thing, like to have alcohol or moonshine and stuff, all that. But I don't know if that's just the effects from that all these years later, or if certain like denominations or, whatever. Like I said, my church, it was like a bad word. Like you just never ever say the word alcohol or beer or wine. It was, I don't know, it was like just very strange. And it's not that anybody ever came up to me and said, don't talk about it, but it just felt like you weren't allowed to. And it was very strange. I
think that's actually part of it is like, I mean, again, if the culture around you supports that ideology, that style, it could work. If alcohol is a bad thing, then, and again, this kind of goes back to like, even from a church standpoint, I remember I used to work with Hermie. Hermie was a Southern Baptist preacher.
Yeah.
And I used to work with him, and he was really against alcohol, but he was retired at the time, and I worked with him at a deli.
Oh, okay.
And it was always funny because like he never really frequented the store, and then he started working there. But what was funny is that like he always joked. He said, "This is the place where all the Baptists get their beer."
Oh yeah,
because he'd run into members, and then they would try to hide their, try to hide their 12-pack.
Right.
And I mean, again, I think that's just it, right? Like if you're gonna, if you're going to say alcohol is bad, then don't drink alcohol, and that's fine. I think you can raise your family like that. You can raise your kids like that. But again, a lot of this comes with how we're raised. We're not raised. I mean, again, in France, they drink like wine at like every meal.
Mm-hmm.
But again, they don't get smashed. In Germany, like I said, they were drinking beer at breakfast, but it wasn't about getting smashed. It was about, this is a good beer, and I'm going to have a beer, and I'm going to eat breakfast, and this is going to be a nice day.
Yeah. This is going to be a nice day. That's what
it was like. There was just no party atmosphere or anything. It was just common.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the things that, as Americans, like we lack. This is why a lot of people debate over whether or not America has the drinking age right.
Yeah.
Because we have it at 21, which means people sneak around to try to drink.
Right.
And, other places like Germany and so on and so forth, they don't. It's like 16, I think, or something like that. Their penalties for driving under the influence, from what I understand, are much harsher.
Yes.
But then also the kids learn how to drink from their parents, and their parents teach them about how, it's okay to have a beer, but it's, we're not gonna take it too far. We're not gonna,
Yeah.
And again, I mean, look, this is a snapshot of a culture that I had on a trip where I went to a touristy place.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that this is all the answer, all the rage. Maybe other places in Germany have huge issues that I'm just unaware of. But all I'm saying is I do think that that's a huge part of the American problem. The American problem is that a lot of the parents, and even the parents of the parents, and so on and so forth, were basically raised up to think that alcohol is only for getting wasted.
Yeah.
And that's just not true.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, again, having a nice pint is actually quite pleasant.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think again, in terms of the overall like Lutheran outlook on alcohol and stuff, that's usually where we go.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
Yeah.
In terms of other drugs, and I'm not going to go too deep into that territory.
Okay.
But I will say, again, a lot of that even comes down to what is sober-minded versus what is not.
Mm-hmm.
Do you lose the ability of your faculties? Do you lose the ability to think and process?
Yeah.
Because if you do, then yes, the Bible kind of speaks against that.
Yeah.
If you don't, then that's a whole different story. But you also have to realize, like, again, we are also going to need to talk about at some point, especially if you go into other illicit drugs, like what is the impact it has on your body? Remember, your body is something that God gave to you. Mm-hmm. It's a gift. It's a wonderful part of his creation. So if it came out tomorrow that crack cocaine doesn't inhibit me, but I'm still sober-minded, it's still bad because it's killing me.
Yeah,
It's killing me on the inside and stuff like that. So the sober-minded thing doesn't even apply here because it's killing me.
Right.
So again, these are kind of your dare I say, your other arguments against the more illicit drugs.
Right. Now going into, because I've heard people try to make this claim that, a lot of the stuff in the Bible where people see God was just like hallucinogens. Like the people like to say the burning bush was like some sort of, basically like a hemp bush or something that like when it was burning or like it burned and then it gave Moses this he just was like hallucinating God talking to him. Now, like when you hear those things, what's your thought on that?
And again, I've actually talked to a few people lately, and I feel like this kind of comes up over and over again. It's like everybody tries to create or craft this narrative or this reason that this won't work or that won't work. And the reality is like try to take that argument and then look at the things that don't fit, because it's the things that don't fit that are gonna really work against you.
Yeah.
Like, okay, let's just pretend for a second. I'm not serious, everybody. I'm pretending. Let's pretend that that's exactly right. Moses saw some hemp bush. It was on fire. He was hallucinating, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Right. Whatever it was. He would have been just flat out murdered by Pharaoh.
Why would he be murdered by Pharaoh?
Well, he would have had this hallucinogenic element. He would have thought he would have been sent on a mission from God. He would have gone all the way to Egypt only to be murdered the second he told Pharaoh that, no, my people need to go. Like Pharaoh would have been like, "Ooh, you're God. Let me stick a spear through you and see what happens."
Yeah. Yeah.
What happens whenever, Moses, uses his staff and turns the Nile into blood? Obviously that's not going to happen. He's hallucinating.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Again,
the whole town was hallucinating.
Yeah. Yeah. Pharaoh's going to end up going, "You are on something. You need to go away." They would lock him up.
Yeah, yeah.
They would lock him up. It would not be anything. And so that's the whole point. Like if you take that at face value, you say, okay, yeah, you're right. This is definitely the case. None of the rest of the story makes sense. Mm-hmm. And then that's a foundational element. So now hardly any of the rest of the Bible really flows,
Yeah.
And so, so none of that really works. And the same thing applies even with you talk about some people say, the disciples were hallucinating when they saw Jesus risen from the dead. It's like,
right.
Okay, but Jesus didn't just appear to the disciples. He appeared to 500 plus people.
Yeah.
All over the place. And even Paul references it later and says you're like, you saw him.
Yeah.
It's like, again, it's like, okay, so the disciples were hallucinating. Well, what did they do? Weekend at Bernie's with Jesus? You know what I mean? Like it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. No, the reading through the text, the thing that seems to fit the most is that Jesus rose from the dead. And so all of a sudden we go, okay, so if we're going to believe what the Bible says, Jesus rose from the dead, in which case, okay, well, now we have a living God who died on the cross and rose again. It's like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. So again, that's where you run into these stories. And again, they're hallucinating, they're drunk, or they're this.
Well, that's what there's people, they like to try to say, well, all these experiences like in the Old Testament where they talked to God, they were all just hallucinating and they were all just on, or some people even try to use it as it's totally fine that they were doing drugs because it's just that's God gave us this natural gateway to speak to him through this through mushrooms or something, which I don't even know if they had mushrooms in that area at the time. I don't know, but it's just that's the argument people try to make is that that's a lot of these visions or things they were just drugs. And
there are certain cults I know that actually follow suit and try to take on drugs so that they can have some illicit experience or whatever, or have some kind of deity or whatever.
Yeah.
And a lot of these things are just hijacking the brain. That's all they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and a lot of them, your brain is interpreting as poison. I mean,
yeah.
Some of the euphoric, I mean, again, it's been a while since I read about this, but again, I think mushrooms was a prime example where your body is registering the ingredient there. It's registering it as poison. And so it's giving you visions and stuff, expecting your body to die.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's enabling you to experience some form of euphoria, so that you won't freak out when you're dying.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, that's what you're doing. Great. Now, again, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that was something else, but I remember reading about it and I was like, oh, that seems healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe it was shrooms or maybe it was something else or yada, yada, yada. But either way, again, kind of comes back to that whole, no, your body is a temple,
mm-hmm.
You can't just do illicit drugs because you want to. God gave. Now, look, I mean, this is also, and this is one of the things that we, as I should talk about, but your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit. Your body is something that God has gifted you and given to you, and that means you need to treat it right.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, for a lot of us, myself included, that means diet and exercise.
Yes, yeah.
I'm not always the best, but
no, me neither. I guess.
But yeah, I mean, again, so that's one of those things too.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta look at all sides of it. But
yeah.
But in terms of the heavy duty narcotics, especially, now that kills you. That that messes you up.
Yeah, Yeah, I don't see a lot of people who have a little heroin in the morning, with their breakfast. That's doesn't usually end as well, for them in the long run. But yeah, I don't know. It's always interesting to me when people try to throw out an argument like that, and I don't know really where it's coming from, but yeah.
Well, I mean, again, I think a lot of people like to try to poke holes in Scripture and the Bible because, again, either they don't believe or they don't want to believe. One of those two, and it's like. And it's like, here's again, a lot of the times, when they're saying it or when they're talking through it, it all seems to be very reasonable. Mm-hmm. It's only when you take a step back and you go, okay, but if he's just, again, if Moses is just seeing stuff, then how did he achieve all that over in Egypt?
Yeah.
And then you go, well, maybe he didn't. It's like, okay, well, but we have some other historical records that, I mean, again, so like the one I always talk about, like, there are two dates mm-hmm. for Joseph, or not Joseph, Joshua of Nun, okay. Right? And there's two kind of competing arguments, and it all hinges on when Moses, was in Egypt. And so there's two competing arguments. One of the big arguments in favor of, I think it's the later period, mm-hmm. Other than a lot of the historical evidence we actually have in Israel in the Holy Land, but one of them is actually, ironically, Pharaoh's brother. See, because Pharaoh, Ramesses, he didn't live a real rapid long time, and his brother eventually took over. Mm. And I forget the name of this guy. His name was, of course, wild because it's Egyptian and ancient. But he tried to push everybody into monotheism.
Okay.
Egypt, who is a very polytheistic nation, had a lot of gods, tried to ditch all of them in favor of a single god.
Oh, wow.
And he was eventually assassinated. He was like a pharaoh for like only a couple years. People hated it.
Oh, wow.
But, you think about it like, well, okay, so imagine you're Pharaoh's brother and, and Pharaoh went up against Moses and your gods did nothing while his God, his one God, did all of this crazy stuff to you. Yeah. And then all of a sudden your brother dies at some point after that, even if it's 5-10 years later, mm-hmm. You're still going, maybe we need to convert to just one God.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but it's really wild. Like he tried to convert all of Egypt to monotheism. And again, he failed miserably.
That's interesting. I did not know that at all.
But yeah, so you got this weird, awkward, historical anomaly, which is not a historical anomaly if you understand Moses. Mm-hmm. And again, you can't expect historical records to talk about Moses from the Egyptian side because, well, big military people don't like to talk about how they got slapped around.
Yeah.
And they usually don't,
Yeah.
So you just don't usually see that, which means you're going to see it written on the side of Moses, in which case you're going to say, oh, well, that's just belief. That's just faith. Well, yeah, but it's also giving you a record of kind of what happened.
Right. That's interesting. I'm glad at the beginning of this you said, that's a great question. Because I didn't know. I'm like, I don't know if that's going to be good or not. But
yeah. Well, I mean, again, it's one of those that a lot of people have and a lot of people like think about, especially in terms of alcohol.
Yeah.
I mean, because there are so many churches out there like so anti-alcohol.
Yeah.
And again, you want to make sure you're sober-minded. You are called to be a good citizen of the United States. So if you do drink, don't drive. It's okay. The level of drunkenness and what is drunk in the United States is going to be different than the ancient world. You need to keep that in mind. Mm-hmm. And then in terms of like making sure that you are biblically at a place where you're not intoxicated, that would mean making sure that you have all the use of your facilities. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, that's, I don't know. I wonder, there's just some places that are so anti that, and I wonder if that can cause almost some issues for certain people that might cause issues. Because if it's someone like, let's say there's someone who's like, well, they do enjoy having a beer, and maybe every once in a while they have one in the morning or something. I don't know, but they like the whole idea of like, oh, don't talk about it, or don't, like, you can't say anything. But I wonder if that almost puts pressure in a weird way to them that, like, I don't know,
maybe,
like they're trying to be someone they're not.
I guess you're catching me a little off guard. This whole "don't talk about it" thing, like,
yeah, it's probably not. It's probably to well, to you, it's probably like, well, why wouldn't you talk about it?
Well, yeah, I mean, again, especially if it's like the way the church. If your church stands on something, you should be able to talk about it.
Yeah,
like, right, at least hold a conversation.
Yes,
like, you should be able to understand, where your theology comes from and why you believe what you believe. And I mean, don't get me wrong. Sometimes the Bible just says stuff and we go, okay, that's that. Like, the Bible says it, therefore it just is, and yeah, we're not given all the answers that we wish we had. For sure, there's some of those times. But then you go to those scriptures and you read them and you go, okay, I don't get this, but here it is.
Yeah.
Right. You don't have to like it to say, okay, this is just it.
Mm-hmm.
But, again, you should always be able to talk about it. Like, even on topics like that, you can still say, like, I don't get this. And, like, maybe somebody else gets it.
Right.
Or maybe not. Or maybe you guys can all commiserate together and go, yeah, we all don't get this. But let's talk about it anyway.
It's funny. This actually I didn't even think about this when I brought up the subject, but this popped into my head is when you're saying, like, how it's almost like, what, like, it's so different than what, like, you're used to, of like, why would you not talk about it? I remember we went on a mission trip, and this was with a Baptist church. This isn't the church I grew up with, but a Baptist church that I would go to some stuff with friends and everything. We went on a mission trip, and I remember one of the leaders, it was one of those situations where there was multiple leaders that were kind of, there were some butting heads, and you could tell, and they weren't making it super obvious to the kids, but it was obvious that there was a group, there's a couple that they were being a little difficult to deal with. And I remember him telling us he was getting so fed up with them. And I remember he said to us, like, apparently they had brought up something about how he drinks. Mm-hmm. And he's like, and he said something like, I like to have, like, if I have pizza, I have a beer. Like, that's it. Like, I'm not, like, drinking all the time and stuff, like, but I just remember it was so, like, even then, like, when he told us about it, it was almost like, hey, we can't really, it's like, yeah, sometimes I have a beer when, and so it's just, so I don't know why it is very interesting to me, because that was kind of one reason why we thought this podcast would be cool, is like the difference between how absolutely. Like I grew up versus you. And it's just so interesting that this subject is so, like, almost to a point, like, you're like, what's the big deal? Like, you're almost like, I don't get this. And but yeah, I don't know. It's interesting, because it was a big kind of culture shock when I started at St. John's, because it was like, we're having the Harvest Festival, and everybody's like, oh, you got some hard cider, right, Pastor? And I'm like, I'm sitting there going, like, what is happening right now? What are these people talking about? They're not allowed to talk about hard cider.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but it's very interesting. I don't know. Yeah.
Again, it is. And I mean, again, it's one of those things where, like, it has become like this big faux pas. Like, we don't talk about that. But the reality is that, like, nothing wrong with it. Again, don't get sloshed. Don't get stupid.
Yeah.
But if you want to go have a beer, whatever. Yeah. If you don't, you don't. And that's okay too. Like, beer's not for everybody. And some people just don't like alcohol, and that's okay.
Yeah.
No worries. Like, it's not like you have to. Like, again, in the ancient world, you almost had to, just because the water sources were not always purified. But like, we have good water now. We're good. Like,
Well, that's another thing. I mean, I don't know all the details intimately about it, but I mean, like I was trying to kind of joke that, like, they didn't have Coca-Cola back then. They didn't have, like, soda and all these different options. So from what I assume, you pretty much had water or you had wine, and, like, even I would assume milk. They didn't have anywhere to store milk. So it's like if they milked some sort of cattle or something, which I don't know how much of that they did, but, like, if they did that, they probably had to drink it pretty quick. Like, it was probably like, I'm sure there's a farmer.
I always say like,
you don't even understand what you're talking about.
I always say the ancient world was a world that was filled with a lot of mystery. And like in some ways, they were a lot more advanced than you would ever believe. And then in other ways, they were so behind the times, it was incredible. Like the next time you're at like some museum that's talking about some ancient peoples, undoubtedly there will eventually be a straw. Like somebody used a straw, right? And you go, well, straws are so modern. Well, no, the straws were not used the way that we use straws. I mean, they were and they weren't. I mean, you say, okay, well, they were trying to get liquid from the bottom of the glass. Yes, absolutely. But what you didn't realize is that, like, whenever you fermented the wine, a lot of times a film would start on top of the wine, they'd have to punch through it, and they would use a straw. And so, in the ancient world, they would a lot of times would use straws to punch through the stuff that was like on top of the wine.
Gotcha.
So that they didn't get that grossness.
Right.
And so, be all grossed out, everybody. Like that was, that was how they did it. And so they did use straws. In fact,
Interesting. Yeah.
Not everybody, but a lot of them did. Not everybody could afford them, I'm sure. But yeah, I mean, again, the ancient world. But like I always say, like Mesopotamia, like where the area where Abraham came from originally, like. Some of them had a version of running water. Yeah, like had forms of indoor plumbing. Like it's
amazing.
It's wicked.
Yeah.
Now they didn't have water heaters, and it wasn't as advanced like ours is advanced. But like, we're talking about 1,000 years BC. We're talking about a long, 2,000 years, whatever it is, 2,000 years BC. We're talking about a long time ago, and they figured that out. And then you always go to Pythagoras and like. Here's a guy who is so very, very confused. He actually thought math was God. So he worshipped math. There you go, math teachers. He worshipped math. But yet he had calculated the circumference of the earth within a few meters.
Oh, wow.
Based on the shadow of a well. Again, just incredible what he was able to do. Yeah. Without a lot of modern technology. We always laugh, but like, the Geraldo once, there's a name for you.
Geraldo.
He's like a news commentator. Back in the day, he used to do all kinds of crazy stunts.
Yeah.
But one of them is that he got all these big scientists to actually redo the tip of the pyramid, of one of the pyramid that had the tip kind of ripped off. And this was like in the late 80s, early 90s maybe. And they couldn't install it because it wasn't accurate enough. All these scientists and everything could not make the tip of a pyramid as accurate as the ancient Egyptians had made.
Yeah, interesting.
Their precision was by far better at that time. Now, again, probably not anymore, but at that time, with the team that Geraldo had, they couldn't do it.
Oh, wow.
And so... they did some incredible feats that are still just amazing. Yeah. Even to some degree by our standards. And yet at the same time, some of the times they were really behind, punching straws through grime to drink the wine.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. Well. All right. Well, should we move on to our last segment?
We better. We're running out of time.
Yeah. All right. So I guess it's time for church chatter.
All right. Church chatter. Oh, man. We got to, it's going to be, by the time this podcast comes out, it'll be too late. But we got a big youth meeting tomorrow night on August 14th at 6:30. So that should be fun. Going to talk about kind of some things. National Youth Gathering is coming up. That's always a big one. It's next summer in July, July 19th through 23rd in New Orleans.
Oh, yes. Nolans.
And I always say, every time everybody asks me this, like, oh, don't you love going to New Orleans? And I'm like, no, I do not. Here's the thing. I remember, and I forget when it was, I counted them up. This is going to be like number 7 for me.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous how many youth gatherings I've been to, but it's like, and by the way, I've never been as a youth.
Yeah, just
I've only ever been as a chaperone, or as a pastor. The first one, I guess, I was a vicar, but anyway. I have been to New Orleans. I don't even know how many times, And it's like, yeah, the first time was awesome. You're like,
Yeah.
oh, it's a new place. It's this, it's that. Now I'm like, okay, here we are. We got to go do this. We got to go do this. We got to do this. And for the kids, they're like, oh, this is exciting. But like for me, I'm just like, yeah, been here, done that.
Yeah.
You know?
Look, there's some guy playing a clarinet on the side of the street. Yeah, that happens.
Yeah, let's just stay away from him. But it's one of those things. Like, and I always say, one of these days I'm going to go to New Orleans as an adult. Because there are places that I'd love to go visit, and like they even have some museums and stuff that I've never actually been to.
Yeah.
Walked right by them several times, but with the youth group, I can't just like stop and go in. Yeah. I was actually lucky enough. One of my groups years ago wanted to go to the World War II museum, and I was like, okay,
I would love that. Yeah,
right, exactly, and it was awesome, and I would love to do it again. But it's like you kind of set it up to do what the youth want to do, and that's the way it should be. But yeah, it's just like I've been to New Orleans so many times.
You'd think more kids would be interested in World War II. I guess not.
I guess not. But I a lot of times I go to the aquarium. You get a discount. see, look,
this is great. I love this.
I'm talking like you get a discount. Usually for like groups, they get a group discount. It ends up being real cheap.
Yeah.
I think the last time I went, it was like $7 a person, and we got like the IMAX tickets, so the big screen. It's always like some nature show or fish or something, but it's still fun to go to the big screens. But yeah, it was like last time I went, I think it was like a $7.50 per person package or something like that.
That's pretty cool though.
But you got to call early, and you got to let them know that you're a group and you're a church group, and they'll let you in. They get some like school discount pass thing that they do.
Well, at least you plan ahead.
Mm-hmm.
I went on a trip. I'm not going to sidetrack too much, but I had to go on this cultural trip to Chicago when I was in college, and we got to this museum, and the teacher was like, "All right, we're here for the tour," and I said, "What? We don't do tours on Thursdays." And she's like, "You don't?" And they're like, "No." "Did you call ahead?" And she was like, "No." They're like, "No, we don't do tour." Like, and so we went. That was like the whole day was supposed to be this tour at this museum, and then it was like, you didn't call ahead and make sure they did it.
Yeah,
like you didn't call and reserve a tour, and so we were just up there for like a whole day for no reason.
Yeah.
So they were just like, you can walk around the museum, I guess. So we just walked around the museum and was like, all right, let's go get food, I guess. There's the day.
There it is.
So yeah, that was not one of my favorite trips. So but so the youth gathering's coming up. Good Shepherd's starting up, right?
Yeah, Good Shepherd starts tomorrow. Again, August 14th. Again, by the time this actually rolls out, it'll probably be a little late. But in terms of like some of the stuff will probably have already passed. But yeah, Good Shepherd is coming, and I'm super excited. I'm going to teach the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. And I'm already doing some lesson planning, so it's really super exciting.
You told me some of them, and I would have loved that.
Yep, I don't want to ruin any of the surprises.
Yeah, we're not going to ruin it, but I personally would have loved that. What you're talking about doing.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. It's pretty exciting. So lots of big things like that kind of coming up. Again, as everything, our confirmation meeting is going to be August 28th. So yeah, it'll be exciting with that.
Yeah, very exciting.
Yeah.
Anything else coming up?
Boy, I'm trying to think. I mean, again, I think our. I'm not going to say this because I'm gonna wait till next.
Okay.
I just can't think of it right now. I need the dates of the Fall Bazaar because we do have a Fall Bazaar coming up.
Oh yes.
And I'm not going to forget it, but it's at the same time I can't think of the dates right on the top of my head.
Now, is this the Fall Bazaar with the noodles?
It is.
Or is this? Oh yeah.
It is. Yeah.
They're really good.
Yeah. They're fabulous. Get noodles. Get noodles, everybody.
That's the only time I've ever made homemade chicken noodle soup myself.
Ooh.
I made it with those noodles. Oh, man.
Best noodles to make it with.
So good.
They got noodle making down to a science. Yeah. It's perfect.
It's perfect. But we won't talk about that now.
No, not right now because I don't have the dates on me.
Yeah.
And I'll have to get those. But anyway. So we got some exciting things coming up, but a lot of it has to do with fall and everything else. Rally Day is August 25th. That'll be a big fun day. We got lots of fun stuff planned for that. And then, what is it? it's the Sunday after Labor Day that we finally kick off the Sunday school.
Oh, nice.
So
yeah.
So all right. Well, I mean, I know this is Church Chat. I know this is Sand Prairie, St. John Sand Prairie. But what's going on over your neck of the woods?
Well, we finished up. We did VBS, which was really fun, and I led a junior high band.
Fun!
And that was really fun. And I've probably brought this up before, but when I was in middle school, that's when the movie School of Rock came out, and it inspired this guy in our church to form a rock band. So that was a very, very important thing in my life through middle school, was doing this band. And it was we played rock music and all sorts of stuff, and it was just really a huge, huge part of my life. And so doing a group like this was really exciting because I know how much that meant to me, and I'm at the point now where I'm I don't know if it's going to mean that much to them. It's maybe it won't, but I'm going to try to do the most I can with it. And I made them all binders with the band on the name, and I put some pictures in the back. I put all the songs in it, and even the chord charts and the music in the back that they didn't need for us to play, but I put it in there so that if they pull it out years later and they have it and stuff. So that I did that. And so that was really fun for me, and it meant a lot to me. And then the cool thing is that's been a couple of weeks now, and I was told by one of the moms of the kids that they've been going to the pool as a band every day. And I'm that's so great. That makes me so happy. So because some of them, they all kind of know each other, but they didn't hang out together. They didn't really know each other at that level. So now they're all hanging out, and we named the band, since it was scuba was the theme, we named the band Scuba Shrimp. So we have the Scuba Shrimp band, and so that was really fun, and that was really it was just cool to get to see that, because I know how much it meant to me, and so to get to sort of pass it down. And it's been really cool because we did VBS, and my daughter is 2.5, and she was probably not old enough to do VBS. They usually want them at 3, but they said, just bring her, it's fine. And I'm all right. And I, the whole time, I don't think she's doing she's not getting any of this. But boy, is she loved the songs, though.
Oh, yeah.
She won't stop singing the songs. So that's been really cool, because we've been just at home playing all the songs, and she's been dancing and singing along to them, and my son has too. So that's been really cool.
Yeah.
But we're, as far as the church goes, they're searching for, or we are searching for a pastor still. So I know they just had a meeting on Sunday, and we're going to make another call, and so praying, hoping that we find a good person and everything. And they're very, very hungry to get somebody in and do something.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yep. Well, all right.
I will say the last thing is this Sunday, we have, since we don't have.
Hey.
Am I allowed to say this?
No,
or is this going to upset people?
Can't. I'm just going to give you a hard time.
Is that we have a guest pastor coming to Our Savior, because we have Pastor Wilcox. Jack Wilcox is amazing, and he comes to the church. But Jack is retired, and Jack's doing 3 out of 4 Sundays as a retired pastor, and so we're kind of if there's anybody out there who can kind of come and fill in on a week, that'd be great. Well, we have this guy. His name's Kevin Biltman.
Yeah,
I think
he's nobody.
He's a nobody. I don't think anybody's ever heard of him. But
nobody's ever heard of him around here.
No, I don't think so. But he's coming this week, so that'll be fun to have him there.
That's great. Pat. I don't know. I'm thinking everybody who listens to this podcast probably knows. But Pastor Kevin was one of my coworkers whenever I first got here in 2014. That's right, 2014. And I worked with him for a couple years, and then he kind of moved on to another church, and now he's moved on to a couple different things, but now he is he does this. He kind of jumps from one pulpit to the other. Yeah. While he also talks about the Shepherd's Canyon retreat, which is a retreat center in Arizona, which is for burned out church workers and stuff like that, or people that are just need a retreat. And so anyway, he's an awesome guy. He's awesome musician. awesome, band player, does the praise band music, very awesome. And so, I think you guys are going to have a great time and be blessed to have him with you guys.
Yeah. It's just it's a small world, It's just kind
of small Lutheran world.
When they said, "Oh yeah, this is Pastor Biltman's going to be there," I'm like, "Kevin Biltman?" Hey, I know who that. I know who that is.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. But that's, I think, it for my end there.
That's it. All right. Well, I do believe that is probably all the time that we have for this version of the Parishscope, the podcast. So God's blessings to all of you, and hopefully this podcast finds you well. Bye.
Bye.